Chapter 6, Video 3, the percent equation. So this is our second strategy for finding the part, the whole, and the percent. Just like we did with the percent proportion, this is another method, another way to do that. And this goes along with section 6.4. So in this section, we're going to use the percent equation. So instead of setting up a proportion, we're going to set up an equation. Now, the percent equation, if I write it out, is that the part is equal to the percent times the whole. The key with using the equation, and this is something you have to remember every time, is that the percent is written now as a decimal. So instead of being p over 100 like it was in the proportion, now we actually just divide by 100 and get our percent as a decimal to plug in here. Okay? So in symbols, A equals P times W. But it's your job to remember that when I plug P in here now, it's going to be a decimal. And if I solve for P, I'm going to have to turn it back into a percent. Okay? So let's talk about that real quick. We already reviewed this, but if I had to turn any percent into a decimal, remember I moved the decimal place 2 places to the left. So 60% would be 0.6. Or 143% would be 1.43. 7%, I still move it 2 places, put a placeholder in there, would be 0.07. So this is key to using the percent equation. We have to be able to turn those percents into decimals correctly. Okay, even more important than it was in the last section, we need to start with the equation and write that down every time. So I'm going to put label A, P, W, just like we did in the proportion, and then write down the equation every time before we start plugging things in. Here's what it should look like. How much is 70% of 400? Label A, P, and W. Well, 70% would be P of 400, tells me W, so I'm looking for A. Write down A equals P times W and draw the line. That is your first step every time. A equals P times W, draw the line. A equals P times W, draw the line. Okay, you're going to do that every time. Then plug in what we know. 70%, but I have to write it as a decimal. 0.7 times W, 400. Remember, one step at a time and bring everything down. So I've substituted in for P, substitute in for W, copy my equation, and now I'm ready to just type this in. Well, because A is already by itself, I'm just going to type this into my calculator and get an answer. So when I type in 0.7 times 400, I get A equals 280. Okay, I'll do one more. What is 95% of 220? Well, this is P, this is W, I'm looking for A, plug everything in where it goes, right underneath it. I'm looking for A, 95%, 0.95 times 220. In this case, again, the variable's already by itself, so I simply type this into my calculator and bring everything down. When I type that in, I get 209. You should be typing and double check that you get the same answer as me. Okay? All right. You try this one and the story problem. Label A, P, and W in what they give you, and then set it up. A equals P times W. Draw the line. Put everything where it goes. Remember, we're going to keep reminding you to double check, is your answer reasonable? So we'll do that when we come back and check this cookie question. Okay, 18% as a decimal times 60, I got 10.8. And then the cookie question, 20% as a decimal times the 30 cookies, I got 6 cookies. So let's check and see if that's a reasonable answer. Your sister ate 20% of the package of cookies. There were 30 cookies. If she ate 20%, she ate 6. Yeah, 1/5 of the package. That makes sense. So always check to see if your answer is reasonable. Okay, next example, finding P. Now, I put a note here. If you are finding P, percent, in the percent equation, it is your job to turn that P back into a percent with a percent sign. Remember, you're going to get an answer that's a decimal, turn it back into a percent for your final answer. Here we go. You scored 22 out of 30. Well, here's my part of the whole. I'm looking for P. So A equals P times W. Draw the line down the equal sign and plug everything in where it goes. 22, I'm looking for P times 30. Well, you can see now my variable is mixed in. So how do I get P by itself? I'm going to have to divide by 30. And whatever I do on one side, I'm going to have to do on the other side. So now I'm typing in 22 divided by 30 in my calculator. And I got 0.733. Now, if you leave that as your final answer, you would get it wrong. You need to turn this back into a percent. So move the decimal place back over 2, and I get 73.3 with a percent sign. Okay, let's try another one. 16 out of 40. Part, whole, write down A equals P times W, draw the line. I got 16, looking for P. The whole was 40, or the total was 40. To solve that, divide by 40 on both sides. Type this into your calculator. When I type it in, I get 0.4. If you write that as your answer, or choose that as your answer, it would be wrong. Move it back over 2 places. Your job is to understand that 0.4 as a decimal is 40% with a percent sign. Okay? Try this one. You set it up. Make sure you get your final answer as a percent. Don't leave it as the decimal. And then hit play when you're ready to check this. Okay, I ended up dividing both sides by 55. I got this decimal. Final answer would be 18 point, and I could round this probably to 2, 18.2%. Okay, before we turn the page, I wanted to mention something. You're probably wondering, why are we setting up an equation when I could do this all with the proportion? You are correct. The proportion also works. This is another strategy, and you'll find that sometimes there are problems that are easier to do with the equation, and some problems are easier to do with the proportion. But we're showing you both, teaching you both, and then you can apply whichever one fits better to that question. Okay? So now we'll turn the page and keep going. There is one more of these where you're finding the percentage, the P. Go ahead, pause, and try this one, set it up, and get your final percent here. Okay, 14 out of 22 would look like this. When I divide 14 divided by 22 on both sides to get P, I got this decimal. Your job, make sure you write it as 63.6%. Okay? All right, we've got one more type of problem. Find the whole. So now we're looking for W. Again, let's label A, P, and W as we're reading. 45 would be the part, is 20% P of what number? I'm looking for W. So A equals P times W. I'm going to go ahead and write A equals P times W. A equals P times W. All right, we'll finish this one. 45 is 20%, again, I'm putting that in as a decimal, times what number? So in order to get W by itself, I have to divide by 0.2, and we're definitely going to want to use a calculator here. That'd be easiest. So these cancel out, bring down your W, and when I type in 45 divided by 0.2, I got 225. Double check me on your calculator. We'll do one more together, and then you're going to finish these two. 60%, that's my P, of what number? That's my W, is 70. That's my A. So plug everything in where it goes. 60% needs to be written as 0.6 times W. If I want to get W by itself, I need to divide by 0.6, divide by 0.6, Now those cancel. Bring down my W and type in, go ahead, do it, 70 divided by 0.6. And I get 116.6 repeating. Okay. So you have two more here where you're solving for W. Plug everything in on these two examples, and then hit play when you're ready to check both of those. All right, I've got this one worked out. Plug in 30% as 0.3, divide by 0.3 on both sides. Here, this one, 30 is the part, plug in 80% as 0.8, and then divide by 0.8 on both sides to get W by itself, and I got this. Remember, if it's a story problem, number one, make sure it's reasonable. Your cousin got 30, you got 37, your cousin got 80% of what you got. Yep, that checks. And number two, make sure it's labeled. Any story problem, your final answer should have a label. In this case, $sign. Okay, there are 6 questions here. Some are simple, just basic APW ones. And then I gave you 3 test scores and asked you to find your percentage, how many did you get right, and how many points was it out of. So again, there's 1 of each here, 1 of each type here, A, P, and W. I want you to pause and try all 6 of these with the equation. Okay, even if you like the proportion better, you're trying these with the equation to practice the equation. Okay, so all of them should be a simple A equals P times W, A equals P times W, A equals P times W, and you're going to do that for these 6, and then hit play when you're ready to check them all. Okay, let's just check if you have everything set up correctly here first. Plug in A and W, plug in A and P, plug in P and W, and I'm looking for A, and then you can finish solving these in your calculator. Okay, there's my answers for these ones. And then make sure these are done and ready to check before you hit play again, and we'll finish it up. All right, 85 as a decimal times 60 gave me 51 points that I got on my science test. Here, 18 was the part, 23 is the whole. When I divide by 23 on both sides, and remember to turn this back into a decimal, 78.3% with the percent sign. And 75% as a decimal, I got 36, divide by 0.75 on both sides. There were 48 questions total. So there is the percent equation.